Hi, my name's Sean. I'm 50 years old and a former sufferer of ankylosing spondylitis, alias AS. I now play racquetball 2 to 3 times a week, mountain bike ride, and studied Wing Chun Kung Fu for the last 15 years, which isn't bad for a former arthritic. My symptoms first started when I was in my very early 20s. It was characterised by a very stiff lower back and gradually spread to various joints throughout my body. I had elevated ESR and CRP levels, and was almost hospitalised on a couple of occasions. I was completely crippled. As a young man, I was devastated from one stage being active and playing football and all the sports to suddenly ending up pretty much bedridden and in excruciating pain. So I set about visiting all the rheumatologists and doctors to try and get a diagnosis, and it was apparent that no one really knew what was going on. I think I had 6 or 7 different diagnoses, which when you read about them, you could relate all of those symptoms to what was going on. But meanwhile, my joints were flaring up on a regular basis. Sometimes it was triggered by a sort of fever that would then depart, and a couple of days later my joints would literally explode. It was the only way of explaining it. All the major joints, knees, shoulders, hips, feet, hands, some of them used to swell as well. It would appear that the only cure, if that's the word for this, was various courses of anti-inflammatories and painkillers. But I must admit, reading some of the instructions and the side effects of those things really did put me off, and I was kind of convinced that that wasn't for me. So I set about trying to find an alternative approach, because I wasn't one of those people that just believed my number was up. I was only young, and that I needed to get to the bottom of this. So I went round to lots of alternative practitioners, if you want to call it that, homeopaths, Reiki, and various other. In fact, I tried them all. Some gave me some relief, but nothing really seemed to provide any long-term relief. I've been working very closely with somebody called Dr. Mansfield, who'd written lots of books about arthritis and allergy connections, so that was something we explored. And indeed, there were some allergies there, and my symptoms perhaps improved a little bit at times, but even he never got to the bottom of it. He then mentioned that he'd heard of a professor in London called Professor Alan who'd been studying AS since the early 70s. And he had worked out that Klebsiella was involved in the causal chain of ankylosing spondylitis. Everyone with AS typically, or 96% of people, have something known as HLA-B27 tissue type, and that interacts with Klebsiella bacteria through something called molecular mimicry. So essentially the bowel bacteria that we all have proliferates, and when your immune system goes in to actually reduce those numbers, anyone with HLA-B27 tissue type, their immune system gets confused, and that's how it becomes autoimmune. So it not only attacks the bacteria, but it attacks your tissues and joints as well. I went up to see Professor Ebringer at the King's College Hospital, where he was doing a lot of his studies, and there was the usual waiting rooms of people with wheelchairs, walking sticks, and walking frames, really quite sad, of all ages. And I went in to see him, and he did some x-rays of my sacroiliac joints. He tested my ESR and C-reactive protein, and clinically was able to confirm that I did indeed have ankylosing spondylitis. I was partly relieved to get a name for it, because at least you know what you're dealing with. But I was shocked when I asked him what I could do to actually relieve these symptoms. I assumed he would then pull out his prescription pad and write me down a number of anti-inflammatory treatments and various things. But he said simply that I needed to starve the bacteria. And I kind of said to him, you're joking, aren't you? How's that even possible? And he said that bacteria, Klebsiella, lives particularly on starch. So I was given my orders by Professor Ebringer to starve the bacteria, reduce starches, particularly wheat and potato, and try and keep low on the likes of corn and oats and rye and rice, etc. This seemed almost unbelievable, having spent 10 years, of research, speaking to dozens and dozens of people. I'd basically been told in a matter of minutes that I need to starve the bacteria out. But in any event, I was in agony, and I was prepared to try anything. So off I went. Got home, cleared the cupboards out of anything that remotely looked like it had starch in it, and changed my diet to more meat and vegetables. Within 2 or 3 months, it was evident that things were gradually improving, maybe not at the pace I would have liked, but nonetheless, there were signs at that stage that there was some improvements as the inflammation started to subside. I had various follow-ups with Professor Ebringer, but what I couldn't understand is everyone else in the waiting room was still clearly in agony. And I questioned him one day and said, what's happening outside? Why is no one else showing improvement? And he basically said to me that those people were unable to not have a sandwich at lunchtime, to, not have roast potatoes with their dinner, or a jacket potato with salad of an evening, which I found absolutely remarkable. But nonetheless, I carried on. And there was a stage, probably at around about the 6th, 7th, 8th month mark, where I had a feeling of getting my life back. Now, there's not many people that can say they've actually experienced that, but I actually went through a period where I thought, I've got my life back. I no longer had to wear slippers to work. I could go up and down the stairs without pain. My lower back pain had subsided, and all my joints were starting to return to normal, even despite them taking quite a battering over those 10 years. I'd always been reluctant to take anti-inflammatories. I was always concerned at the side effects that might have on other organs, so I did battle through with just a little bit of Nurofen or whatever, just to give me a break periodically. But by now I was sleeping again. I could walk to work. I could even get on a bike, and all these things I'd not done for years. I've stuck to that. And I can sit here now and say I've not eaten wheat and potatoes for pretty much 18 years. I now, play all the sports mentioned earlier in the interview, and I'm as active, if not more, than anyone else. By keeping low on carbohydrates, it naturally keeps your weight down anyway. And I still meet up regularly with Professor Ebringer. And ironically, he likes to meet at the Pizza Express near King's, but we don't eat pizza, we eat salads. He always finds that quite amusing. And probably it's been 18 years now since I last took any form of painkiller. I'm completely anti-inflammatory free. I don't take anything like that. So it's all about diet and fitness, well-being.